Hello, I'm Dr. John Owings. Welcome to my podcast, Integrative Health Insider. This show is sponsored by my clinic, Advanced Integrative Health Center. Our focus here is chiropractic, functional medicine, and functional neurology as an integrated approach for health and longevity. So today's talk, we're going to be spending, this might be actually a 2-episode talk, but we want to talk about what really matters in life is if we're going to talk about aging. And what's important on modifiable factors of aging that allows us to, if we're going to live 80, 90, or 100 years old, how can we be the healthiest that we can be? Or to give credit to Dr. Pete Attia, make sure I say his name correctly, he calls it the marginal age, that last 10 years of our life. We need to train to be healthy in that time period. And you can't approach it you can't be lazy about it, because it's in those last years, that marginal age, where we get a lot of accelerated aging. But if we start today, even if we're in our 30s or 40s or 50s, and we start looking at the modifiable factors of aging, we can begin changing the outcome in that last decade of life, so that if we're going to be alive then in our 80s and 90s, that we're mobile, that we know who we are, where we are, and we're going to touch on these modifiable factors of aging as it pertains to aging, dementia, Alzheimer's, because they actually are very closely related to each other. But we want to age where we know who we are, where we are. We know who our kids are, who our grandkids are, and maybe a few of us might even get a chance to know who our great grandkids are, grandchildren, and we can talk to them. We can carry on a conversation. And at the same time, we're minimizing our need on our dependence on medications. Right now in this country, the average senior is on upwards of, depending on the age bracket, 7 to 12 medications. I've had an 80-year-old come in here really sick, and the worst I've seen is 20 different meds. After a while, it becomes a little insanity after a while. So what if we can take back control? And that's really what this podcast is going to be about, is slowing down a little bit, thinking about, instead of disease states that we work on, what about wellness lifestyle steps we can take to improve our aging, slow it down, improve the quality of life, and take care of our bodies. So I'm going to start going through concepts. These aren't in any priority. They're just outlined. They're all, if I went through 12 things, I would give them all a 1, because they're all important that we do them all and we integrate them all into our lifestyle. First one that I'm going to talk about is blood sugar and insulin resistance. This I see on labs everywhere. And this also, by the way, many of these concepts also apply to cognitive impairment, that being Alzheimer's and dementia, which are all technically inflammatory diseases. It's just that the inflammation, instead of hitting the heart causing heart disease, or liver causing liver disease, or hitting the kidney causing kidney disease, this one's hitting the brain, it's causing brain disease. We call that dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. There's a lot of different ones. Frontal temporal demise. So let's talk about blood sugar regulation and insulin resistance. These are probably the number one conditions that I see on labs. And what are we looking for when we see blood sugar? So there's a couple things we look at when we see blood sugar. One, what's my glucose level? What's my insulin level? What's my A1C level? And these are all markers that we need to look at. And chronic hyperglycemia, when your glucose gets over 100, and maintaining fasting glucose, the glucose levels we want to be, the numbers will give you below 99 milligrams per deciliter. What we really want is below 90. So when we're doing labs and your MD is doing a lab value and you see it at 100, 110 for some people, that's really way too high. I'm always working with my clients. Hey, you're at 100. Let's see if we can get below. Let's shoot for 95 next time. Let's go to 90. That starts protecting the brain, because type 3 diabetes, what we're calling it now, from hypoglycemia, is one of the early stages for dementia, Alzheimer's, which in the street vernacular we call brain fog, which is actually more like type stage 2 in Alzheimer's. So the first metric we want to lower is our fasting glucose below 90. The next one we want to see is your A1C, which is a measure of your glucose over 90 days. We want to see that. I frequently see that at 5.7, 5.8, 5.9 on patients, really our target goal. And those are marginal numbers, but we want it at about 5.4. And the next one we want to get lower is your insulin. Research is variable on that one. It's a pretty large range. I like to see it 7, 8, kind of low. How do we end up doing that? The best way to improve that is intermittent fasting, which is also an actionable step. It's one of our priorities. Is a product of lowering the blood sugar, decreasing insulin resistance, and improving insulin sensitivity is intermittent fasting. So that can be another one on our list of things to do, which is time restricted eating. So that's where we're eating. Like, I frequently never eat breakfast. I'm a lunch and dinner, noon and 7. I go 7 because I'm never out of this clinic and home until 7. So I get a first meal at 1, a second meal 6 or to 7, depending when I get home, and I won't eat again until 12 or 1 the next day. So that's your intermittent fasting. Time restricted eating. We want to prioritize low glycemic foods. Those are foods that are actually just surface vegetables. So broccoli, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, some of the things that people don't like when you learn how to cook them and eat them correctly. They inherently are low carb, giving us a low glycemic index. Things like potatoes. I'm going to put carrots and some of the tubers that grow on the ground, like parsnips and stuff, in that list. We can still eat them. Don't eat piles of carrots just as a snack. Certainly you can have stews and you can put carrots and parsnips in stews. I'm okay with that, but you're never going to see me just sit down and eat a high glycemic vegetable like a carrot just nonstop. So we want to prioritize getting rid of potatoes. Sweet potatoes you can eat. They're high glycemic, but if you actually parboil, I get asked this question a lot. I love sweet potatoes. Can I have them? Yes, we do sweet potatoes, but frequently we will parboil them. That removes a lot of the starch out of them. And then my wife or myself will make a mashed sweet potato, which we season in with the healthy butter and then add whatever spices we want to add to it. But we don't sweeten it with sugar, brown sugar, anything like that. So 2 on our list is, of course, lowering the blood sugar and introducing intermittent fasting. These are good ways to decrease the inflammation of the body and decrease glucose, improve insulin, lowers A1C as a marker, and that improves the body. Doing those steps also improves a third metric, which is chronic inflammation. So low-grade chronic inflammation is now becoming really the reason for all-cause mortality that leads to more diseases than we don't have time to name here. I'm not talking about genetic ones you're born with. That's real. But chronic inflammation from blood sugar problems, chronic infections, poor diet, processed foods, sugars, gluten, dairy, do in fact create inflammatory processes in the body. And so by taking the steps, by introducing intermittent fasting, eliminating gluten and dairy from the diet. When I say dairy, I'm okay with small amounts of cheeses that people that have cheese, it's dairy. Whole cheeses I'm okay with, but not sitting down eating a stack of cheese. Okay, so you can cook with some cheeses. That doesn't bother me. But by getting rid of the gluten, not drinking milk, dairy, getting rid of the cheaper oils and moving into avocado oils and olive oils to cook with, knowing how to cook with those oils. That's a different show, using them. Will decrease reactive markers. There's the reactive markers that we look at, that you can look at. You can look at labs or C-reactive protein. That's on a lab. There's elevated markers, what we call primary phase reactants, that'll show up, like ferritin, glyc-A. Glyc-A is made up of a measure of inflammation. I measured on my labs. It's basically got 5 different markers in it. We want to see those as low as possible or absent on labs. So taking the steps with the anti-inflammatory diet, surface vegetables, clean meats, intermittent fasting, you begin to lower markers in the body like interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are all correlate with cognitive decline. So again, getting all that stuff, getting all those markers to drop are ways that we can signal the body that inflammation is going down. We can see that inflammation is going down and taking the stress off the body. But to that, glyca, C-reactive protein, looking at another marker is omega-3 index. That's a marker that we can see how much fatty acids that you have in your body, the ratios. We want those at healthy levels because they're anti-inflammatory, to C-reactive protein, to the marker of glyca. But what else can we use for the chronic inflammation that helps lower it? Beyond the controlling the blood sugar and beyond controlling, adding in the intermittent fasting. But there's also the anti-inflammatory nutrition that we can take. So vitamin D is an anti-inflammatory. Your essential fatty acids are anti-inflammatory. Why are they important? Because the body will then take your omega-3s that you eat, EPA and DHA, and downstream, it converts them into molecules called E and D resolvins. E and D resolvins have another subclass of molecules, but their primary focus is to resolve inflammation that's been going on. So those who scream and holler how they don't like fish or they don't like to take supplements with omega oils because they taste bad, I would encourage you to get over it. Because the body uses these to make a class of compounds, again, called E resolvins and D resolvins, that are designed to shut the inflammation process off once the body's handled some inflammatory pathways. So when we have a resolution of an infection or resolution of any inflammation, it needs to downregulate those pathways. And one of its mechanisms are the EPA, DHA from the fish oils that we take, from the foods that we eat in a healthy way, and it resolves and ends the inflammatory process. If it doesn't have those in place, it can't shut the inflammation process down, or it struggles to do so. So again, adding omega-3s help with that, and other compounds like resveratrol and curcumins. The common curcumin is turmeric. So those pathways, those are nutrition that we can add. Turmeric, resveratrol, vitamin D, essential fatty acids are all anti-inflammatory, which supports the body's resolution of inflammation. I want to get this concept. We always have inflammation going on. The difference is, can we keep it to a low burn versus a fire that's burning all the time? And the goal is to keep inflammation as quiet, deal with what it has to deal with, but be able to resolve those pathways when it needs to be able to shut them off, and shuts them off. And we're not doing lifestyle problems that are continually igniting the flames, which is high carb foods, processed foods, crummy oils that they're cooking with, lack of exercise, which is another modifiable factor we'll talk about. So the next that goes right into lifestyle and intermittent fasting is nutritional deficiencies. So these are big, and I test for all the things I'm going to talk about. B vitamins, magnesium, vitamin D, zinc, copper balances. So understand that when you eat all the time, you inflame the body. When you eat all the time and it's processed foods, fast foods, poor nutritional value, the body can't run metabolic reactions. It can't resolve inflammation, which triggers more inflammation. Some of these pathways in inflammation will actually loop themselves and be self-replicating pathways. And when you have poor nutrition, you can't shut them off. So it goes back to healthy longevity, living a long time with a good quality of life. We call it a health span. We want a health span that ties to our lifespan. And one of the modifiable factors is, are we getting nutrient-dense foods? And are we supplementing with, in my position, I talk about plant-based nutrition a lot. So are we getting adequate levels of B vitamins, magnesium, vitamin D, zinc, copper ratios are good, vitamin A, vitamin E. We need all these nutrition to run enzymes in the body that allow our body to be healthy. And they need to be at adequate, healthy levels, which is why we don't want processed foods, because you can literally be starving to death and dying because you have micronutrient starvation. We don't have a macronutrient problem in this country. Macronutrients being proteins and fats and carbs. All you have to do is look outside and see that by published literature, 50% of the US population is obese. They're not dying from macronutrient starvation. They're dying from micronutrient starvation. And so we need to get into getting good, adequate, whole food, surface vegetables, nutrient dense. I prefer organic if we can get it. Again, with the intermittent fasting, with the whole food nutrition, you're decreasing blood sugar, you're decreasing chronic inflammation, you're giving the basic nutrition the body needs to function, run metabolic reactions, which has a second effect on our mitochondrial dysfunction, which is another modifiable factor. Before I go too far in nutrient deficiencies, it's fun to note now that we can actually do a lot of lab testing with genetics. I use a lot of different companies for a lot of different testing. It's just what's out there. If I find something better, I'm going to use something better. Right now, I use MaxGen Labs for genetic testing. And we can actually check some of the genetics on B6, B12, folates. Because we can have people it's interesting to note that we can have people who are getting adequate levels, but their levels are showing up low. And when we do genetic testing, we can see that they carry SNPs that are interfering with the ability to absorb your B complexes. So there's just things that we look at in the clinic on how we can improve function. Nutrient deficiencies is genetics, because of genetic problems, is an issue. That segues me into another modifiable factor is, of course, I'll get back to the mitochondria, but genetic testing gives us a control of one of the modifiable factors of aging and for Alzheimer's, because we can look at deficiencies we have because of genetic problems. And so it's just one of those that you can genetically test for the variants. Do you carry the ApoE4 gene? What copies do you have? Do you have the ApoE3, 4 combinations? There's a lot of different combinations, but you can see that with the genetic testing with MaxGen Labs. We can look to see if the genetics has any effect on your vitamin A, your vitamin E, your vitamin C, your D, your B6, B9, B12. We can check for all of those. Again, that's just, you don't continually recheck genetics. You just do it one time. You look at what you've got. And of course, a good lifestyle would be to address those issues from a modifiable nutritional intake and be aware of them and be mindful of them. And that becomes one of our modifiable factors of aging, that once you have the tools, once you have the knowledge, you're responsible for it, live a good life and apply the genetics to your body as how your body's inherited it. So that's a simple modifiable tool. But then again, we get back to the next level of, I said, mitochondrial dysfunction. And again, poor nutrition will create stress to the body. It will create, there's this thing called oxidative stress. So oxidative stress, let's talk about mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress. Mitochondria make energy from foods that we eat. Not going to go down the different pathways and how it's shuttled into the Krebs cycle and into the electron transport chain, all the biochemistry that goes on. There's a lot. And even I have to review it from time to time because I do lots. But on a bigger scale, when you have poor nutrition, poor B complex intake, maybe you have some genetics that are having a problem in there as well that's creating problems with B complexes. That's going to create mitochondrial dysfunction, because the Krebs cycle requires just about every B complex to run that shuttles the nutrition into the Krebs cycle. Excuse me. Said that wrong. The mitochondrial electron transport part of the phase. So you've got this Krebs cycle that requires all the B complexes from the foods we eat, that you might have genetic problems that you need to address genetically to see if you carry, that you need to support. But in order to make the compounds in the Krebs cycle, you need the B complexes that then get shuttled into the next pathway where the mitochondria make the energy that we use to keep us running. So you can have mitochondrial dysfunction because of B deficiencies and inflammation. And of course, when the body has to resolve inflammation, And when it's cleaning out and killing up cellular debris, when it's cleaning up cellular debris, when it's taking care of viruses and pathogens, bacteria and stuff, it creates these compounds called reactive oxygen species, ROSs they're called, that need to be neutralized. So in states of chronic inflammation, you run out of the compounds. You can put so much stress on the system that the body doesn't have enough compounds to clean up the reactive oxygen species, the ROSs. And so that then puts more stress on the system. And this can spiral out of control. So this is why, so what does the body use to clean up reactive oxygen species, which is compounds like glutathione, compounds like superoxide dismutase and catalase. These are compounds that we make. But when you have chronic inflammation and the immune system is chronically activated and is trying to clean up this stuff, you can exhaust your systems. And pretty soon you're inflamed because the systems can't keep up. And this creates oxidative stress. This kills mitochondria. Think of mitochondria as a little battery. Understand that some cells have think of how tiny cell is. And most of the cells, except blood cells, most of the cells in your body have between 5,000 and 10,000 mitochondria inside them. And they're making ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is your energy pathways. And you make, based on some literature I've read, you make and consume up to 86 pounds of ATP a day. You can't see the molecule in your body, and you don't put on 86 pounds of weight because your body makes it and burns it as energy sources. And you've got 5,000 to 10,000 mitochondria per cell cranking out this energy that it needs to stay alive. Now think of what happens when you're chronically inflamed and your little battery packs are dying throughout your whole body. This is where we start seeing the brain fog, the tiredness, the fatigue, the no energy. If you're not careful, the medical model wants to jump over to, oh, it's in your head, here's a drug, or your thyroid's not working, which is another problem that we talk about. But whatever they want to give it, I don't care. The issue is the fact that some of these processes are lifestyle problems, nutritional deficiencies, cells dying, mitochondria can't produce energy, and these pathways just keep going on and on and on. So, again, what happens when we go back to the basics? Intermittent fasting, surface vegetables, high nutrient density foods, rich in antioxidants, okay? Decreasing glucose, decreasing things that are high glycemic foods, dairy, getting rid of gluten, which is a pro-inflammatory. It's about everybody's body. You start decreasing inflammation. Now you can add in the nutrition, like the resveratrol, the turmeric, the vitamin D, the essential fatty acids. It starts cleaning up this stuff. Then you can add in other nutrition to help repair mitochondria, things like alpha-lipoic acid and acetyl-L-carnitine. Those are all used by energy for the liver, used by the mitochondria to make energy. There's little things you can do. Another one, CoQ10. A lot of people are on statin drugs. Statin drugs destroy coenzyme CoQ10, and you lose energy production. You can put that back in. Exercise and therapies like red light therapy enhance mitochondrial function. That's what we do in the clinic. When I'm working on patients, it's all, okay, what's our exercise doing? Let's use red light therapy. We do a lot of red light therapy on the head, hands, feet. We use PMF therapy, pulsed electromagnetic field therapy, all create energy for the mitochondria, like battery charges for the mitochondria. But beyond the therapies you can use with exercise and red light and PMF therapy and infrared saunas, you still have to have the diet under control. You have to work on deflaming the body, handle the nutrition deficiencies. And then one more topic that I would add in there is, are you sleeping? You see, your body doesn't really heal during the day, in a sense. It does most of its healing at night when you sleep, especially in the brain. You've got a lymphatic system in the brain called the glymphatic system, which is our waste removal. And it has to take all this metabolic stuff, and it does it at night when you sleep, and it has to clean it out. And if it can't, you end up getting these plaques, amyloid plaques that can build up. And those are the early stages of Alzheimer's that begin to show up in pathology. That's what they've discovered. But if we get that 7 to 9 hours of adequate rest, or I tell most of my patients, there's really nothing on at midnight. So why don't you try to go to bed at 9 or 10? Get some rest. You see, that is an anti-aging maneuver. It decreases the aging process. You're getting rest. Neurological systems, the lymphatic systems in the brain can clean up. And we're starting to have repair of the body. And if you're not sleeping, that's when I encourage people to have sleep studies. Can we talk? I am, as a chiropractor, can't order them. But I can make recommendations. If we talk to the MD, can we get a sleep study? Because you're not resting, your brain is inflamed. So even if you got everything else going good, you've got rid of gluten, you've got rid of dairy, you've added intermittent fasting, your blood sugar's coming down, your A1C is coming down, your insulin sensitivity is improving, you're getting exercise in, you fix all the nutritional deficiencies, you've added in to fill in the holes, you've added in the B complexes in the body, in a format the body likes to use them in. That's a different talk too. You've got the magnesium, you got the vitamin D, you got the zinc, copper. You've got, you get adequate iron, iodine, the micronutrients are in place. If you don't sleep, you're still at risk. You have to be able to sleep and wake up naturally. That's what I encourage people to do. And if you're not, and you feel tired and fatigued, significant others says they can report snoring and breathing issues, and notice you're waking up. Those are things to investigate. From a chiropractic functional neurology perspective, in my clinic, I make recommendations with MDs to get sleep studies if they'll do it. But again, that's an action statement, an action thing that you can do. Another one is, again, because we do lifestyle changes, we engage what we call the gut-brain axis. And I think I'm going to have a whole talk on the gut-brain axis coming up here, but I'm going to talk about it briefly because the gut-brain axis is a portal of entry for inflammation. So your gut and your brain talk to each other through one pathway called cranial nerve 10, which is the vagal nerve. And you can spend a little bit of time. I encourage everybody, hey, start Googling this stuff up. Read about it. Start learning about it. You're not going to learn it at the high-end neurological level, but the basics out there, you should be able to start applying to your lifestyle. Because the vagal nerve talks to the GI tract and it's sensing what's going on, and it's a portal of inflammation back to the brain. So one of the things that we want to look at is, does a person have a dysbiosis in the gut? The processed foods and the junk foods people eat create inflammation that can lead to SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You get bacteria from the lower GI tract, colon area, coming up to the upper GI tract. It's not supposed to be there. It's inflammatory. And inflammation is, what does that mean? It means the GI tract is a tube. It's got a mucosal lining. And we all have bacteria living in there. We all have viruses that live there and some parasites that live there, but it's under balance and under control, and it's a relatively stable environment. When that gets out of balance, the immune cells that live there go, hey, what's happening here? This is not supposed to be here. And it triggers inflammation. And when it gets bad enough, you can erode the mucosal layer of your GI tract. You expose the epithelial layer. Your absorption of nutrition starts to drop. It's pro-inflammatory for that. You've got cells that sense that environment as well. They're called dendritic cells. They're out there sampling the environment and sending information. When you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth that's not supposed to be there, the bad bacteria, it inflames the gut. These dendritic cells pick up on that. They can actually pick up on the healthy food you're eating. They can crosstalk, send it to the lymph system in the body as an immune response. You can start getting cross-reactivity from food to bacteria. The body sees it as a threat. You can drive autoimmune pathways through this stuff. Your body can see the unhealthy gut bacteria, see the food, and say they're the same, and create an immune response to the food you're eating. And then see that food and say, hey, that's getting in because I have inflamed GI tract, and say, hey, that food particle that I'm now immune problem to looks just like my pig and organ, my joints. And now we have an immune system response causing an arthritis problem to your body. These pathways can get crazy. So again, what happens when you do intermittent fasting? What happens when you do surface vegetables, clean food eating? You're feeding the gut microbiome healthy food, no sugar. Well, you start having healthy colonies of the bacteria that are supposed to be there. You deflame the gut. You indirectly deflame the body. You decrease autoimmune problems because you're not having reactions to the food. That's another talk we should do.